change to spend. Well, the Fed's saying today it will continue its bond buying program without giving any hints as to when it might begin to. Actually, they did give some hints about when they're going to taper off, and that's one reason the market tanked. But while everybody's glued to what Bernanke says, our next guest has been saying end the Fed for years. Former Congressman Ron Paul joins me now. Dr. Paul, great to hear from you again. Hope you're enjoying retirement.
Yes, I am, David. Nice to talk to you.
So, first of all, just a big general question. What would the world like, what would the financial markets look like without the Federal Reserve?
Well, first thing is there'd be none of this anticipation of 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks waiting for something to happen, an announcement by the Fed. Then there wouldn't be sudden jumps up and down and then wondering what will happen tomorrow, because it wouldn't exist, and you wouldn't. The markets smartly anticipate what he says because it does have an effect, but it shouldn't have. In a free market, the market sets the rates. There probably wouldn't even be hardly any. There certainly wouldn't be future markets in currencies. You know, when you were on a gold standard, there wasn't any such a thing.
But even in a free market, don't you need a lender of last resort? I had an old boss at the Wall Street Journal, the editor who you loved, Robert Bartley, as I did as well. Yeah. And he disliked a lot of what the Fed did, but he said we need a lender of last. When you have banks, you need some sense of assurity that if you make a 30-year deal with them, there'll be some lender of last resort if that bank goes under.
Yeah, I think so, but it should be market-oriented. It shouldn't be that the lender gets the authority to print money out of thin air. So if you had a free market, the banks would get together and they would have a fund. They would pay into it. And then if a bank gets into trouble, they can come and get rescued. But to say that there's a lender of last resort and they can print the money, it's a moral hazard. They're going to take more risk, and they certainly do it. And sometimes it works for a lot of years like it has. But eventually, the bubbles get too big and it becomes unstable, and then they burst, and then you have these kind of troubles. And certainly in the last 5 years this has happened, but where the mistake has been made is they didn't allow the liquidation of debt because it encouraged bad investment and bad debt. And if you allow this to happen, we're doing what Japan has done. We're doing what we did in the Depression. Now we're doing it for 5 years, so we're still in a sluggish economy. The real problem that the Fed faces right now is what happens if next year everybody agrees, oh, you know, it's sluggish, we're going into a recession. What are they going to do, lower interest rates?
Right. Well, there's a more immediate concern, and that is that interest rates are going up. Today we saw the 10-year yield go up significantly by about 7%. Do you think that is going to continue to happen?
Oh, yeah, and I think that proves the point that there's a time when the Fed loses control. So today he talked about under certain conditions.
Let me just stop you there. Let me just stop you there, Dr. Paul. That's a great question. Has the Fed lost control of interest rates?
Oh, yes, because all that talk today about, yes, I'll raise it if I need to, I'll buy more if I need to, I'll do the other, whatever is necessary. But in the meantime, interest rates have been going up, and they went up significantly today, and markets are more powerful. I think back to the days when I watched the gold markets in the early years, that our government fixed gold at $35 an ounce, and for 10 years we dumped gold by the tons of it. But eventually the market rules out. So all this manipulation distorts market, causes all this malinvestment, excessive debt, but markets win out. Markets want to deflate. Governments always want to inflate.
Dr.
There's
Paul,
always going to be a limit.
Short of killing the Fed, a lot of people are looking at Ben Bernanke, and his term is about to expire. Just about everybody agrees he's not going to be good for another term. Paul Volcker kind of gave him a slap down. I want to read some of what Paul Volcker said in a speech he gave on May 29th. He said the credibility of the Federal Reserve, its commitment to maintain price stability, and its ability to stand up against pressing and partisan political pressures is critical. Independence can't just be a slogan. That's sort of a slap down. It's done in a gentlemanly fashion. but do you agree with what Paul Volcker said?
Well, sort of, but I don't think it has anything to do with Bernanke. I think it has to do with the system, price stability, interest rate stability. All of these things are imaginary when you think the government officials or the Federal Reserve and central banks can do this. They're imagining that they can do things that only markets can do. There are such things as real interest rates, and there's manipulation, but eventually the markets will rule. Right now, the markets are saying we're going to higher interest rates. Maybe we're done with a 30-year cycle on bonds. And if everybody knew that to be the case, can you imagine what they would do tomorrow? Everybody would dump bonds. But they're not. It's going to be up and down, up and down. But I think we've turned the tide. I think we're probably moving into a period of time, maybe 10, 20 years, that you're going to see steadily rising interest rates, just as we did, from the 60s up into the 80s.
Ron Paul, who says the Fed has lost control of interest rates. Former Representative Ron Paul. Doctor, thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Maybe not.